What's up, everybody? This is Taylor Vippolis, and I want to welcome you to the Players Lounge, a new podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina in partnership with Heels for Life, which is UNC's NIL collective created to bring together UNC football players, fans, and businesses. The Players Lounge will be a podcast that spotlights players on the current team to give fans the chance to learn more about them and see the personalities that make up the roster they cheer for and support. It'll be hosted by myself and my former teammate, Shakeel Rashad, who is now the executive director for Heels for Life. Shaq, thanks for getting on here tonight for the intro podcast. People heard our podcast about Gene Chizik coming back. They saw the chemistry, they saw the reviews, and they said, hey, we need to get these two guys on a podcast. That's essentially how this went down, right?
Yeah, that's actually step for step exactly what happened. I'm glad that you were so concise going through that.
A detailed article by Greg Barnes came out on Thursday on Inside Carolina about the collective, but for fans who might not have read it in its entirety or just hearing about this for the first time, can you explain what Heels for Life is?
Yeah, sure. I will, like you said, a detailed article came out. I'll fly over this at like a 50,000 foot view. I won't get too in the weeds, but really, like, we saw NIL flip college football on its head last year, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it changed the storyline of what you had seen a lot of in college athletics. And so what was really cool is that there was finally an opportunity for players to make money off of their celebrity, right? Their name, image, and their likeness. But that doesn't put hours back in their day. We know that they have commitments in school, they have commitments to the field, they have to study film. And so while all that's happening, the players wanted to have opportunities outside of it. Fans wanted a way to engage. And so Heels for Life kind of steps in the middle to say, hey, we can find a way to compliantly let the fans get a little bit more content. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we're Inside Carolina, right? That we're cranking out content the way you guys can. But what we can do is we can have these conversations with players that you don't usually get access to. So we can have fun things like that happening, let fans get a way to engage with it. And then through the memberships with Heels for Life, we can actually compensate the players for their time making that content. So they get really fun and not too much like it's not like they're searching and scouring the internet. Like, we get to bring those NIL opportunities to them, and fans get to know their team a little bit better. One thing that's a little bit different about Heels for Life from some of these other collectives you've seen is that I mentioned earlier that this was founded by a group of football supporters. Heels for Life is privately funded, the whole thing. And so you can be sure that when you have a $15, $20, $100 membership, whatever it is, it's not like we're saying we're going to keep some of it and give the rest of it to the players. Whatever comes into Heels for Life is going in opportunities for those guys. So this is truly a great way to get it done. And you can be sure that it's going right to the players for opportunities.
How did you come into this role with Heels for Life?
Yeah, so a group of football supporters that support both the university and the team kind of looked at the landscape and had the foresight to see, okay, this thing is coming. It's coming down the train tracks. It'd be really cool if we could set up something like this for our team. You see them pop up at Indiana. They pop up at Florida, all across the country now. They started putting this together, and then I lucked into being the guy that got called to come help run the thing. And so I was in a sales role at a software company before this, where I was actually selling to collegiate athletics, NIL software, go figure. And kind of, it just made sense, right? So we started having conversations, and all of a sudden I had the great honor of being the executive director of Heels for Life. And so it's a lot of fun.
I think the biggest question that fans have that are interested about Heels for Life is, how can they get involved, or what can they do to support Heels for Life? So what would you say to the fans that are wondering how they can get involved?
I would say right now there are three things. The first one is you can go to heelsforlife.org. That's with the number 4. And when you get there, take a read through the website. Watch the video on there. There's an awesome video that UNC actually posted on their YouTube channel. We linked it there. It's Coach Brown talking about NIL. But go through the website, learn about it a little bit. And then when you land on that commit page, it's going to have memberships. And so with those memberships, we actually take those membership fees, and that's what we're using to pay players to do those opportunities, to come in and to record an interview, to jump on a podcast. So things like that, that's where it comes from. The second thing I would say is, if you are or know of any companies out there that want to work with players on marketing and endorsement deals, things like that, send them our way, right? We have the ability to reach out to players, get in touch with them, and connect you guys so that you can figure it out, because they are some of the more recognizable names and faces in Chapel Hill, around North Carolina. And so we've seen some really cool things happen already, where people are doing advertisements with players. Talk about a tongue twister, right? And it works out well, right? They're seeing a return on that investment. And so you love to see those happen. So the first one is the memberships. The second one is those companies. The third one is to go to that athletes page. So all the athletes are in there. They might have already been doing cameos. They might have already been selling T-shirts, doing coaching lessons. We almost serve as a directory in that way. You can go to our website and you'll find that Guys like Storm Duck already have a link up there. Guys like Keyshawn Silver has a link up there. And so you'll see their face, click on shop, and whatever they have going on, it's going to pull you right into it.
Yeah, and the NIL across the country, it's important where you're kind of seeing an arms race and who can kind of get their guys up to speed with the NIL and this changing landscape. So besides helping the program try to reach these new heights and get to places that all the fans want to see them get to, what are the benefits to a Heels for Life membership that fans do get?
Yeah, access to exclusive content is going to be one of them. And I will say again, like we're not right inside Carolina. You won't have Taylor Vippolis doing all these things, but it's really cool. We're going to already plan to sit down and have conversations with these guys. I'm thinking through some of the things we'll talk about, just fun conversations that would usually happen in a locker room, that would usually happen somewhere else where you don't really hear it. You're going to get to know the players a little bit, where they're from, what makes them tick, why they are the player that they are. And so it's a little bit more personal and intimate in that way. Looking into the future, looking at things like events, things like auction items where it's signed memorabilia. And so just trying to make it easier for fans to find those things rather than scouring the internet and maybe finding something that could end up being fake.
Yeah, and I saw that any Heels for Life member by is it tomorrow?
That's tomorrow. That's tomorrow.
When this podcast comes out Friday by 11 a.m. So anybody who's listening to this podcast, it's probably going to come out around 7 a.m. So they'll have about a 4-hour window. It's by 11 a.m. and you'll be entered to win 2 Duke tickets.
2 Duke tickets to the game this weekend. Coach K's last loss in the Dean Dome.
You win that. It basically pays for your membership right away.
Yeah, for a while.
Now, with this partnership with Inside Carolina, there's nothing exclusive about this podcast, but what is your vision for this Players Lounge podcast when we do bring players on in the near future?
I think that we land on the name of this because it says exactly what we want it to be. I think that some of the best conversations I've had in my entire life, the most fun, happened in a locker room and in a players lounge. And so it's like, hey, kick your feet up. Let's have a good time. Like I would love if we bring a guy on here and he's sitting there with his dog and his feet up on the couch, right? Like, let's have a good time. Let's kick back and talk about the things that we would talk about in the locker room. I've kind of mapped out some of my most fun conversations, texted some of the guys I played with, like, which ones got the most rowdy? Let's bring those back. And so it'll be a good time. We want everyone to hear that. And it gives you a way to get to know these guys that you never would have in the past. Like, I remember how freaked out everyone was when it came out that like Switz was a giant Beaver fan. I was like, we found that out 4 years ago, like 3 years ago in the locker room. Like, what are you talking about? The guy's been playing All That Matters since 2013. And so more things like that, just so when you see people scoring touchdowns, making tackles, forcing fumbles on Saturdays, you're like, oh my gosh, I know that guy's favorite shoe is this. Or wow, I know the reason that guy plays this position is because of why, right? So we want to bring that to the podcast, let people get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think the reason why Shaq and myself will work together hosting this is because, like Shaq mentioned, we've been in the players' lounges, we've been in the locker rooms, we've been in the cafeterias. We know that these guys have personalities and they have irrational confidence at times to where we want to show that unique side over when you're traditionally hearing them in these press conference type settings with the standard status quo, like, tell me what you worked on this off season, where you kind of just get the same repetitive answers. So for me, I think the goal is to give the players a chance to highlight their NIL opportunities, but also, like Shaq mentioned, have fun. A couple of questions when you texted me, a couple of questions I've kind of had in mind for when we do bring on players. You could pick 3 teammates to fight with you during a zombie apocalypse. I need to know who's your foxhole guys, who's got your back. And then the other one I saw, which is a good debate, if the 5 fingers on your dominant hand could dispense condiments, which ones would you choose and why? So the more unique the questions, like if fans want to throw out suggestions and how to get to know these players more beyond the traditional stuff that you would hear in a press conference, you could send those ideas to Shaq, you could send those ideas to me, and we'll try to incorporate them as best as we can in the podcast. But I think the overall goal and what we kind of wanted to get across in this intro podcast is that we want this to be a platform for players to be comfortable and for players to have fun. And I don't think there's any two better people who could get that out of people than people like me and Shaq who've kind of been there, right?
How about that humility from you? I don't think there are two better people to do it.
Oh, if I'm gonna get a
Hey,
chance to pat myself on the back,
yeah. Pat yourself on the back.
I've got a ever since my Carolina days, I'm 5'9", but I've got an extremely long wingspan. No problem reaching my back.
I'm not sure if you remember this one, but the year that UNC basketball won that most recent national championship, I won't put names out there and embarrass guys, but we had 5 guys on our team that were probably average to below average high school players that said they could beat those 5 in a pickup game.
Yeah.
And stood by it too. They stood by it, which I respect. So good for them. I hope we hear more of that. I want to hear people claiming that they can do that.
The irrational confidence, that's where it really gets people going and really brings out the best of everybody. But we're recording the first episode within the next week, most likely. So until then, Shaq, appreciate you getting on here and looking forward to our first player guest.
I appreciate you. Always a good time.